in some ways, I would say Ragnarok's the most comic accurate Thor movie with just how colorful everything is. Because that's pulled like straight from like the 60s Stan Lee, Steve Ditko style of Asgard and everything. But I think they really started to lose Thor's character in that movie. Well, Taika Waititi started to lose Thor's character in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, even I've talked with my dad about this, and he's got the line, "Oh, he's a friend from work."
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I know that line was actually from a Make-A-Wish kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to argue that line.
You're wrong. That's not how the character of Thor is supposed to be. It sounds so bad, but I know what you're saying.
Hello there.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Talk to me, Goose.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Why so serious?
World! I could do this all day.
Are you watching closely?
I need to improve my lighting at my desk here.
It's you are very backlit, I'll say that.
That helps. Now I look washed out. I just literally looked up white on my monitor to try and help with the lighting a little bit.
Yeah, I actually, when I was filming a video where you like crack open a compartment or a chest, I don't know what you would call it, like it's not a chest like a big moving, hope chest or something. It's just a little box, and you're supposed to crack it open, and it's supposed to be glowing with steam at you. I took my phone and looked up the color white, zoomed in, screenshotted, and then turned up the brightness, put it in the box, and then we just pumped a little bit of fog in it from a fog machine. And then if you closed it, the fog wouldn't dissolve in the air. And then we would roll, and then we opened it, and it looked just like the movies where it was steaming out and glowing at you. I thought that was really fun. But yeah, I mean, white screen works fine. So Ellie and I have been watching through MCU. We just got through Thor, I think, last week. Yeah, last week was Thor, and it actually prompted me to ask you if you wanted to do this episode. Because the first Thor is actually really good, isn't it?
It is. I just rewatched it today.
Yeah, it's so good. And that might be what a lot of my notes are on.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't watched The Dark World. I think I've only watched it once, and that was in college when I did an MCU watch through. And then I've seen Ragnarok plenty of times, and Love and Thunder is recent enough that I would remember it. So, but I think there's a lot to talk about. I think he's actually one of the. I mean, we'll have a whole episode on him, not because he has 8 movies that he appears in, but just because he can be a very deep character, and especially what they did with him in the MCU is interesting, and could go one way, could go the other. But first, I wanted to ask you what you thought makes Thor Thor. I think that's what all these character studies have been focused on, is not necessarily the movie version or a different alternate universe version. Like, what makes Thor Thor? What makes him the God of Thunder?
Dude, it looks like got like the rapture happening behind me. That light's just insane.
It's very angelic.
I don't know why it's picking up like that. I don't like it.
What kind of light is it? Is it a ceiling light?
It's just a normal ceiling fan.
Oh, it's a ceiling fan. Okay.
But it's the only source of light in this room. So
Sure. It looks very different from what you usually have. Like, you've been in this room before plenty of times.
Yeah, I mean, normally there's more sunlight coming from the window. So I think that's kind of affecting it. But anyway, so Thor.
So Thor.
Who is Thor? Who do I think Thor is? That's a hard question. I think he changes more as a character, more than really any other character in the MCU does. Part of that's due to directors, but I think that's partially just how they wanted him to be written overall as well.
Mm-hmm. Forget anything about like where he starts versus where he ends. Just, he's the God of Thunder. He's Odin's son. Like those are the basics that we can nail down, right? But also,
those are the basics.
What's the frog version? Frog Thor?
Throg.
Throg, yeah. I don't know if that, like, again, there are variants of Thor.
Yeah.
But still, I think the Thor that everyone knows and loves is the long blonde hair, Norwegian based, as in like
very
looks like a Norwegian. And I think it's interesting, especially in the first Thor, that it suggests that magic and science are the same thing, and that back in the time when the mythology of the gods was being created by these not even prehistoric people, just before like history started to be recorded, and they were writing things down as mythology instead of facts. Like when the Asgardians would come and fight battles on Midgard, Earth, they would just see that, write it down, and that turned into legends and myths that we know today of, Zeus and Athena, whatever. I like that extended lore almost, where it links to our universe, where there's no superheroes. It's just, superheroes are America's mythology. Yeah. So then they still roped in other mythologies with characters like Thor, which I also think there's two different versions of Thor that people could picture, is the MCU Thor and the Thor from the God of War game or games. Because neither of them are the actual mythology Thor that you would learn about in Greek mythology class or something. It's their representation or their
Norse mythology.
Norse. I keep saying Greek. I'm sorry. I have no excuse. I'm not going to defend myself. The Norse mythology.
Actually.
Yeah. Their interpretations of that mythology. I think the God of War Thor is a really cool version, especially where he's kind of antagonistic. He has a different kind of hammer, and there's some cool action scenes in that game I've seen. But I also think the Thor that we see in the MCU has many different arcs that can be followed. But one great one is connection and sympathy. And this is off the top of my head, no notes. I think he likes to feel wanted. Does that make sense? I don't know. It seems like he wants that connection with his mother. He wants to be respected by his father. He wants to have a relationship with Thor. He's really close with his friends, the Guardians 3. Is it Guardians 3?
Well, he said he wants to have a relationship with Thor. You mean Loki?
What did I say? Loki. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He wants to have a relationship with Loki. His deep friendship with the Guardians 3. Is that what they're called?
Warriors 3. Lady Sif and the Warriors 3.
Lady Sif and the Warriors 3.
Yep.
He kind of gets there with the Avengers, but the people that he grew up with really are his closest friends and family, and I think he wants that. And that's why in Endgame, he feels like, I think that's the culmination of what the Thor character becomes, is when he's talking to Rocket. And I think we'll get there in a little bit, where he just lost everything that meant something to him, and that's what Thor is he wants that connection. And I think that might actually play into Love and Thunder a little bit, but we'll get there when we get there. But that's at least the Thor that we're presented with. There's more aspects to talk about with that too.
I think one of the biggest parts of Thor as a character is just humility, I would say. That there's the quote from Spider-Man Homecoming, it's like, like the "what are you without your suit?" And that fits with Thor. Like even the first movie, it's like, "What are you without your hammer?" I guess he loses his mother in Dark World, and then he loses his father, and then all of Asgard in Ragnarok, and then leading into Infinity War. And then he kind of loses even more people at the end of Infinity War. And just kind of learning, I guess, who he is without the people and the objects that make him who he is.
Yeah. I think the people and objects is big.
Yeah. I think he thinks he's especially, at the beginning of the first Thor and kind of in Avengers and kind of until Ragnarok almost, I'd say. He thinks he's this big, important warrior. But then when he actually loses his hammer in Ragnarok, he starts to see that he is kind of just a man in a certain way. Well, I guess he's more than a man, but his power doesn't come from the objects or people in his life. His power ultimately comes from within himself.
Mm-hmm. Power is within you. You have the power. I think one of the best parts of Ragnarok is when he's having the vision of his dad. He's like, "Father, I don't have my hammer." He's like, "Are you Thor, the god of hammers?"
Oh yeah.
It's a pretty epic moment, but it's still telling. Is like Thor has held on so much to the symbol instead of the power that's behind it, and that could be translated again. I caught myself editing the Batman episode from 2 weeks ago. I had said that we don't want to put a Christian perspective on these characters, as in like shove it upon them and say that this is what they believe. Obviously, they're gods of mythology and not real. But a lot of people will put more value on a cross or a crucifix or an actual physical Bible than the actual power behind it and the meaning behind it. I don't want to say that people worship it, but some people will see the actual items as more powerful than believing what's behind it, and that's the power of God that lives within us. But I want to encourage people to think about the power of God not as something that's within a cross or within a Bible or just within a church. It's universal. It's within those of us who have put our faith in him. And it's not about the symbols. Like you can have a cross for decoration and to remind you who's got power over your life, but you can't go to that cross for special power or something. Maybe that's also something that loops into the horror movies where the crucifix is used. Not necessarily horror movies. It's just exorcisms often in real life using the crucifix from a Catholic priest. But at the same time, that's a physical representation to the demons about how to, like, who's in charge. Like this is who you have to bow to is Jesus, and yet you can't just hide behind. You can't just hold it a crucifix and be like, ah! You need to have power behind it and know who's on your side. And again, this is way off topic, but the point is, it's not about the symbol. It's about the power behind it. And in Thor's version, in character of Thor in Ragnarok, he finds out that he's the god of thunder, not because of the hammer, but with the hammer. And then he also gets Stormbreaker and blah, blah, blah. So that's my analysis of it. It's long and winded.
Well, I think another kind of going along with that too, it's kind of like how the Pharisees sought power kind of within the law alone, in a sense, if you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
And just kind of like how Thor kind of sought power within just kind of his hammer and his people, and he just kind of relied on them too much, with Pharisees and the law and Thor and his hammer and his friends and people. It both ways it eventually failed for Thor and the Pharisees. Only when they sought the source of the true power is when they were able to kind of be who they're meant to be.
Yeah, you're right. Again, getting caught up in symbols instead of knowing the depth of it. Other characters like Captain America, Iron Man, Batman that we've talked about before are characters who are ordinary becoming extraordinary. And Thor, at least in his first movie, is an extraordinary creature, being, God, becoming ordinary. And that's what humbles him. It's kind of the opposite of DC, because I think a lot of the DC superheroes are extraordinary characters who have to pretend to be humans, whether that's Superman or Wonder Woman and their alter egos. And Batman's the only one who's the normal human, whereas with Marvel, most of them are human being superheroes, and then Thor is the one outlier who's the the god who's sometimes in the comics he pretends to be human, I think. But yeah, that's the difference with Thor, and it's shown especially in the first one where he's sent to Earth as not as a human, but as without his power. that he thought he didn't have. Again, he's not worthy in that moment until he was self-sacrificial, but he also couldn't lift his hammer, and therefore he thought he couldn't do it. I don't know if the lightning goes hand in hand with the hammer in the sense that if he's worthy, he can have the power of lightning and thunder, but I don't know. He didn't even try, and we didn't really explore that until Ragnarok. So,
have you ever heard about how Thor and Cars have the same plot?
I don't think so, but it makes sense now.
Okay, listen, I just found this description here. So a man on the road to greatness ends up lost in a small desert town with seemingly no hope of getting back to the life he knows. Over time, he falls in love with someone there and learns to be humble. With the character development complete, he's able to return to his life, never forgetting the people in that desert town. That's Cars and Thor right there.
That's pretty good. I like that.
Lightning McQueen, Thor, same character.
Thunder and lightning, yeah. That's good. Thor's arc in his first movie, again, we can start there, is one of the best and almost the most natural of the Trinity's origin. The Trinity being Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor. Because there's such a stark difference between Thor at the beginning and Thor at the end. There's him in the hall, the grand hall, winking at everyone, and then compared to the end of the movie where he's standing with his father and talking with him. And I have some quotes we can talk about here in a sec. But those are just two different Thors in the best way possible. Not like Thor 1 versus Thor Ragnarok and Love and Thunder. He's learned his lesson. You can see it. He's still the character. He's still haughty and cocky through, like, as he's running through the Shield headquarters and then eventually trying to lift the hammer. Like, he's still that character. And as he's talking to Jane, he starts softening and understanding what life's about, what it means to be worthy. And then he goes and chooses to fight the Destroyer, the Conqueror machine.
The Destroyer.
Destroyer, I had it right. Mm-hmm. And that's the sacrificial love part of it. And then he gets knocked out. He gets his hammer back. And then he goes home and he talks to his dad about being a man. And I think that's just the most natural thing of being, really haughty and showing what the problem is without saying, and Thor was very annoying and very thought a lot about himself. And then it's showing, not telling. That's the point of a movie, is to show the progression of the character. They're literal bookends to the story, like him talking to Odin before and after the whole story takes place. And Odin, though he may be flawed as we find out in Ragnarok about how he conquered some places, he's still a good dad. He's still showing Thor how to be a king. And maybe some could argue that he shouldn't have taken that step of letting him be king at the very beginning of the movie until he knew Thor was ready. But there's a line right at the end, which we'll talk about parallels in a split second. But Odin says, "You will be a wise king." He admits that Thor is going to be a king.
You'll be a wise king.
There will never be a wiser king than you. Or a better father.
That's a good one. But that's Odin acknowledging that Thor has learned his lesson. I mean, he put the spell on the hammer to say, you can only lift this if you're worthy, if you have the power of Thor, or what is it? Whosoever have the power of Thor will lift this hammer. Whatever.
Oh yeah.
And that means that he was worthy, or him lifting the hammer and coming back home was signifying that he was worthy. So.
Yeah, I think kind of in the first movie, as we're talking about, Thor is careless and reckless at the beginning because he has his powers. He's got the thunder and the lightning and all that, so he thinks he can just march into Jotunheim. Jotunheim, is that what it's called at the beginning?
Yeah, that's the Frost Giants. Yep.
Yeah. He thinks he can just march into Jotunheim because he thinks he's got all this power to defeat them. But, it turns out they were too much for them. So that's kind of why, that's why he gets banished. When he goes into fights like that, it's not sacrificial at all. It's because it's prideful. It's because he's got this power. And then you parallel that to at the end when he walks up to the destroyer. No powers, no hammer, no nothing. He just walks up right in front of this destroyer, just, because he's learned kind of the importance of just self-sacrifice, I would say. Just learning that it's not just about the powers, as we've already said, it's about you and who you are. And just kind of the fact that he doesn't get his powers back until he learns that is just very, very powerful.
Yeah, he didn't do it for the glory. He didn't do it to get something out of it at the very end, as opposed to when he went to Jotunheim the first time. He basically had resigned that he wasn't going back to Asgard. He knew that this could be a last-ditch resort to do anything purposeful. Like he wasn't feeling very, very good about himself because he was still in plain clothes. He felt like he had no power, and he knew that he could distract the destroyer at the very least, help his friends and family get away. I guess it wasn't family. But that was his goal, was to just distract, try and do something, and that act made him worthy and then actually able to defeat the destroyer.
I think his line there, he says,
Brother, whatever I have done to wrong you, whatever I have done to lead you to do this, I am truly sorry. But these people are innocent. Taking their lives will gain you nothing. So take mine and end this.
For most of the movie, he's also just not a very apologetic guy, and that goes with the pride. He's not going to apologize to anyone because he thinks he's all this hot stuff. So him standing there, this is like one of those movies that could have just really stood well on itself. I feel like outside of a cinematic universe, because you really just see a character fully developed. And I mean, we see him develop further, but I feel like just here you see a kind of a full hero's journey from start to finish, from like the big hot shot to this humbled guy who has learned just kind of the importance of others and the importance of humility.
There's a lot of lines that are just gold between or from Thor and Odin. The classic one, the one that sticks out, but still so true.
A wise king never seeks out war, but he must always be ready for it.
And that comes back multiple times in other movies, just like with Hela, I think, at one point. But there's also parallels. The parallels, again, with bookends, their yelling match before versus their reflection after, and also how they trade off in those. So there's a parallel of before and after, and then there's a parallel of back and forth. The first one right at the beginning is,
You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy, and you are an old man and a fool.
That just shows they're fighting against each other and they're heated. And we were watching Thor with subtitles, and when Loki interrupts and Odin yells, it just says Odin yells because it doesn't really have any word that you could put to it. He just goes, "Hey,
Father."
Hey! I thought that was funny. But then, yeah, those two lines are paralleled with what I already mentioned.
You'll be a wise king.
There will never be a wiser king than you, or a better father.
It just shows the level of respect that has grown now between the two over the course of the movie and the story. And it shows that Thor wants progress, but Odin knows what's right. And that's kind of the inciting action, is that Thor wants to, that's their yelling match, is like Thor says,
The old ways are done. You'd stand giving speeches while Asgard falls.
and then, but Odin knows yeah, I don't know if Ragnarok tainted our view of Odin at all. Really, I need to rewatch it, but it still seems like he's right in a lot of things, and he's a wise man, wise father and king, and has some problems. Like I don't know, he still sacrificially loves Loki, and Loki doesn't see that in the first movie, but he still cared for Loki as his own. Big adoption story there. Not seeing his past or anything like that, but I think that could be studied for a video. Somebody get on that. So yeah, bookends, parallels, the difference in how Thor and Odin see things versus how they come together and see stuff at the very end. Also, there's a lot of Dutch angles. There's a lot of Dutch angles in Thor 1.
Should do the whole rest of the podcast like this.
I can't even. I'll do it in post, right? I think I texted you as we were watching it. You know, they have the reels that are like, "What if Star Wars was filmed vertically?" And then they use AI to expand the screen. They should make one where a Thor is just completely straight. They fix the horizon of the Dutch angle and then extend the corners so it looks good. When you start watching it, you realize it's a lot. Like it's okay to have it for like a disorienting scene or a artistic touch every once in a while. It's like every other shot that they cut to. and Ellie and I just found ourselves going, I don't know why. I think the director gave a reason, but it was a lame excuse for I wanted it.
I think Kenneth Branagh just had a broken tripod.
Yeah. I actually don't. Maybe have I seen more movies of his than I thought, because I know.
Well, you've probably seen him in a couple movies because he's also.
Oh yeah. That's why I think I've seen him in more acting roles. As a director, he's done a lot of Shakespeare. It looks like Henry V, Much Ado About Nothing, In the Bleak Midwinter. Is that? Oh, that might not be. No, never mind. Hamlet, As You Like It. Is that? Yeah, As You Like It is a Shakespeare. Hold up, he directed Cinderella, the live action remake.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, that's funny. I did not know that.
Oh, he did.
Wow.
He did Artemis Fowl from a few years ago. That wasn't a good movie.
Oh yeah, I see that here. He's been doing the Agatha Christie movies that he's also starred in. I saw The Haunting in Venice. I did not see Death on the Nile or Murder on the Orient Express.
Okay, Death on the Nile was not very good. That's the only one I've seen.
Okay.
He did Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit. I've seen that one.
Yeah, that one's the one with
Chris Pine.
I know we're getting very distracted.
Yeah, we are.
But I remember watching season 1 of Prime's Jack Ryan with John Krasinski and remember really liking it.
Well, Jack Ryan's he's the type of character that's been played by like 3 or 4 different actors.
Yeah, I didn't even know that he was played by Chris Pine. I knew he was played by Tom Cruise in one movie.
No, that's Jack Reacher. I don't think.
Oh. Yeah, two military men doing their own thing named Jack. I definitely wouldn't have gotten them confused.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing. I think like Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Screen Rant article. Alec Baldwin in 1990, Harrison Ford in 92 and 94, Affleck in 02, Chris Pine in 14, and then John Krasinski in the show. So.
What's the name of the? What's the name of the Ben Affleck one?
Ben Affleck is The Sum of All Fears, and that also has Morgan Freeman in it.
I watched that movie with my family once. We're getting so distracted again. But I think we just turned it off halfway through because all of us were bored. None of us were entertained by that movie.
Oh, no. It's that bad. Oh. Wow, now I want to watch it. Cool. Back to... How did we get here? Kenneth Branagh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Dutch angles. And moving on.
Honestly, though,
Okay.
I would rather see another Thor movie from him than Taika Waititi.
Oh, 100%. I will crick my neck to watch the entire movie as a Dutch angle if he comes back and directs another one instead of Taika Waititi. Like, just film the entire movie as a Dutch angle. I will still watch it. I will praise it. I will say this is the best thing ever, just so that Taika Waititi doesn't direct another. We'll get to that in a second.
Overall, he made a really good movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's probably. I would still probably watch Iron Man or Captain America if we're talking about first installments or origin stories. I would still watch those over it, but I would absolutely watch Thor and Thor: The Dark World over anything Phase 4 or 5, except maybe No Way Home and Guardians 3.
You'd watch Thor: The Dark World before most of Phase 4 or 5?
I might take that back. I haven't seen Thor: The Dark World in a while,
Okay.
but I'm just saying, if it reminds me of Phase 1, 2, and 3, yes, I would. I know that Thor: The Dark World is known as the worst one, and I know it doesn't really have... It's kind of just a nothing burger movie, but aren't all of the Phase 4 and 5 movies like that pretty much?
Yeah.
So I'll give you my my review of it when I watch Thor: The Dark World in a couple weeks. I was going to quote our esteemed scholar and great mind known as High Top Films.
Hello, High Top Films.
He said about Thor, "That's what makes a hero. Not being strong, not being super, but their willingness to sacrifice what they love for the good of their people." That's just a generic superhero comment, but he made it about Thor and about the climax of his movie. His first movie is the willingness to sacrifice what they love for the good of their people. And again, pointing back to what inspired this whole podcast is the Hollywood Heroes by Frank Turek. He said that that's why we love a lot of these superhero movies, is because we see a little bit of Jesus in all of them. But Jesus made the ultimate sacrifice. His willingness to sacrifice what he loves. He didn't necessarily sacrifice what he loves, but he sacrificed himself to show selflessness for the good of the people, aka us, the people he loves and wants a relationship with. So it's a little different, but even as he said, in this case applying to Thor, their willingness to sacrifice what they love. Thor loved himself. Thor went from loving self to loving others, and he loved himself to the point of, being so haughty and thinking he was so much, and then Odin taught him a lesson, and he learned that lesson, and then he won at the end of the movie. Woo!
To talk about Thor: The Dark World briefly, I don't know how much we're going to talk about it.
I don't know.
I haven't seen it in a long time either, so
okay.
I probably should have watched it before recording this. But
same. I've made some hot takes about it already.
I think near the end, when he's offered the throne by Odin, who turns out to be Loki, I think, he has this line where he says,
I'd rather be a good man than a great king.
Wow. Wow.
Yes,
that's actually gold.
Line. Because I think
that.
what he's saying there is, he'd rather be, kind of a hero protecting people on, what's the fancy name for Earth?
Midgard.
He'd rather be protecting humanity on Midgard than be sitting on a throne in Asgard. He doesn't care about the throne and the power that comes with that. He cares for his people. Because, that's what really matters.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I totally would not ever remember that, but it's a good quote.
I looked up Thor quotes and I've been scrolling through them.
I feel like you do that. Anytime you need notes, you just look up quotes from that movie because you usually come out with some really good ones.
Usually I have them prepared beforehand, but I'm on Get Fandom right now, just scrolling through the list of Thor quotes.
Yeah. I looked up Madam Web quotes, I think for research for something, and on IMDb, There's so many that are not actually in the movie. It's just people going and adding quotes that don't exist from the movie to troll.
Are those on like IMDb or?
Yeah, the IMDb one specifically.
Oh, nice. Seth, we're getting sidetracked.
It's funny though.
Mix it now.
It's funny. Still, at the top one. Julia Carpenter checks photo of a man. So who is he? Cassandra Webb. That man is Ezekiel Sims. He was in the Amazon with my mother when she was researching spiders right before she died.
That was a line from the trailer, but I don't think it was actually in the movie.
I think you're right. But it reminds me of the John Mulaney bit where he's like,
without sound, we wouldn't have been able to hear such classic lines as "You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll have what she's having." And he was in the Amazon with my mother when she was researching spiders just before she died.
That was really good. I want to see if I can find a fake one.
How much exposition can we fit into one line?
Cassandra Webb, final line. It says in quotes, final lines. It says, and you know the best thing about the future? It hasn't happened yet. Mic drop. Oh.
Is that an actual quote from the movie?
Yes, it's the last line, apparently, because it says last lines.
Wow.
Ezekiel Sims to Cassie, I'm going to put some dirt in your eye. I know that did not happen. I don't think she actually said see ya, chump.
Oh, that's another Tobey Maguire line.
I know. Yeah, I think that's funny.
See ya, chump.
Yeah. Anyways, it's funny to see people meme together on the internet. Let's talk about the comedy of Thor, because throughout his first 4 movies, as in Thor, Avengers, Thor the Dark World, and Age of Ultron, that's my favorite Thor. Probably Age of Ultron Thor is my favorite, because he's become so familiar with the Avengers and he really likes them as friends. But he's still going and discovering stuff about himself and about the reality stones and such. Or Mind Stone, whatever that whole, drug trip he had with with Heimdall in the pool and whatever. But after that, I remember he's talking with Cap and Iron Man. They're walking down the hallway, talking about if the elevator's worthy, and then he takes off and says, "See you later, chumps." And the next time we see Thor, he's cracking jokes and being funny, and I really think that that's the last time we saw a serious Thor. Again, he wasn't all stone-faced and never cracked a joke, but it took a turn in Ragnarok. And it was obviously because of Taika Waititi, but I don't think there was anything in his character that made that decision and changed that to what he became. Mm-hmm. And my note that I have is that it worked for Endgame and Infinity War. More Endgame, because he was trying to use comedy and jokes and stuff a little bit in Infinity War, now that I'm thinking about it.
Well, Infinity War is mostly a serious story.
Mostly, but I'm thinking like when he's talking to Rocket and he's like...
Yeah, but I mean, this Thanos we're talking about, he's the toughest there is.
Well, he's never fought me.
Yeah, he has.
He's never fought me twice.
Like, that's kind of the same type of joking Thor. And yes, he is grieving, but he's grieving more in Infinity War than he did at the end of Ragnarok. And we can talk about that in a sec, but I want to get to the point where he's trying to use comedy in Endgame as Fat Thor to try and cope with losing his home. And I think that works, because that's a real reaction that some people have, is trying to laugh everything off and make it a joke. And that's what we see in the cabin. That's what we see when they're like, Thor, tell us about the reality stone, and he's being drunk and he's trying to be funny. And then serious Thor comes back at the very end for the final fight. Like, I don't think a single joke is cracked after that, except for, oh, you take the little one. But that's Marvel humor, so I'm not going to just chalk that up to his character. I really think that Ragnarok and Love and Thunder stand out as not the same Thor. And I don't want to justify those just with Endgame saying it's coping, because with those as before and after Endgame, it's that's not coping. Like that Endgame grief that he's experiencing is not coping. It's just him being him. and that doesn't hit as hard. Whereas if you took away Ragnarok and Love and Thunder, it would look like that. It would look like avoidance and trying to make everything funny because he knows nothing's funny. Does that make sense? I'm throwing a lot of words.
Yeah. I've had this thought about Ragnarok recently. So I think Taika Waititi definitely made a good movie. I think we can agree on that. Did he make a good Thor movie? In some ways, I would say Ragnarok's the most comic accurate Thor movie, with just how colorful everything is. Because that's pulled like straight from like the 60s Stan Lee, Steve Ditko style of Asgard and everything. But I think they really started to lose Thor's character in that movie. Well, Taika Waititi started to lose Thor's character in that movie. Like, I mean, even I talked with my dad about this, and he's got the line, "Oh, he's a friend from work." Like, so I know that line was actually from a Make-A-Wish kid.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to argue that line.
You're wrong. That's not how the character of Thor is supposed to be. It sounds so bad, but I know what you're saying.
I don't want to argue with a kid who's probably dead, but I shouldn't have said that. Oh my gosh, Zach. I shouldn't have said it like that, but it's not a good line for Thor. That's all I'm saying.
Oh no. I'm sure there could have been a different way to say that, but it's just so good. I'm keeping that.
Oh no.
But you're right. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just how you put it.
All I'm saying is that's a bad line, but I feel bad saying that.
I know. It's like, you could have anything added to the Thor movie. What would it be? And it's like, even if Waititi thought it was bad, he's just like,
okay,
yeah. Oh man. But it also fits. It fits with the movie that Waititi made. I think, especially when it was revealed that he was getting a haircut and he didn't have Mjolnir, like, he really wanted to start afresh. That was like Waititi wiping the slate clean. And yet there's still some really good parts about Ragnarok. I mean, I think Ragnarok is very entertaining. Like you said, it's a good movie. I don't think it's a good third movie to the Thor franchise or an addition to the Thor character. But some of the best Loki development comes from that movie. And I think that's actually something somebody said in one of the videos I watched, is that Ragnarok is so good because everybody goes through a character arc. Banner, Valkyrie, Loki, Thor. So, or Scourge, a very lower tier, not as prominent of a character, goes through a character development a little bit. I also think that it did a better job at explaining where Thor and Hulk were during Civil War, more than just the
Team Thor videos.
The Team Thor videos are funny, but it does make more sense in universe. I also think that if they added both of those two characters to Civil War, it would have been way too overpowered, and there wouldn't have been a good match. So I think that's why they didn't have them. But besides that, I think talking about Ragnarok specifically, and I know it's not about Thor, but it also bleeds into Infinity War, where Odin calls Loki my son, or my sons. He refers to both of them right before he disappears. And Loki looks at him. He's like, oh, he's always seen me as a son. He's always, even though I'm adopted and not even a human or not even an Asgardian, he's always been my dad. And that Loki blew up at him in the Thor movie, and basically made him go into Odin sleep, which again, I think the Odin sleep is such a goofy name for it. I'm sure that's probably lore accurate, but it's like, if I'm going to Seth sleep. But I like that line. I like the Are you Thor, the God of Hammers? Like that's Thor character development. Like it didn't not develop them. It didn't have them go nowhere. That's usually the sign of a bad movie is like, how did the characters change? They didn't. Okay, then that's probably why it wasn't that good. That's Ragnarok. It's still entertaining. I like Jeff Goldblum in it. Again, probably ruined the... It probably did the same thing to Banner as it did to Thor. Would you say that? But instead of being more silly, Banner is just more wimpy. Like maybe they really wanted to... He really pushed the back and forth of Banner being the wimp and the Hulk being the strong one. But it was almost demeaning. It's almost demeaning to the Bruce Banner character.
A little bit.
Because he's whining. He's like whining the whole movie.
Well, it is his first time on an alien planet, so I think some of that's expected. But
fine.
I'd be confused as frick if I woke up on an alien planet.
It's true. It's true. I'm not going to die on that hill. We'll get to Infinity War and Endgame. I think the Thor character, or Thor's internal processing really comes to a head with that scene with Rocket. He's had some of it slip out when he's talking to the Guardians and he's just on a mission. He's like, next thing on the list, get a hammer or get the axe or whatever. And when he's finally with Rocket and they're stuck traveling, he really processes a lot with him. And one of the big lines is,
and what if you're wrong?
Well, if I'm wrong, then what more could I lose?
And then Asgard's gone and most of the Asgardians are probably killed. And he just says, what more can I lose? Like that was his everything. His hammer's gone. Another thing on the list. It's just, that was his everything. And it's heartbreaking. And so now all he has is revenge. And that's almost something that you haven't seen since Thor 1. But again, it's not unbridled rage and revenge like he had against the Frost Giants in Jotunheim. It was just anger about his family, the ones he loved, the ones that made him who he was, as I probably argued earlier. And that probably went into his entrance, which again, greatest entrance of all time in probably any superhero movie. But just that rage fueled his bring me Thanos. Great scene.
I told you this before, but I think Infinity War Thor is the best Thor.
Yeah. I don't think you've said that to me, but I agree.
I think...
yeah, okay. I really like the Age of Ultron Thor. Maybe because of his looks. Maybe his looks play out just a little bit more than the Infinity War Thor. But go ahead.
Yeah, he's kind of hot, isn't he? No.
My wife here... Actually, some people said that I looked like Thor when I had my hair a lot longer. I had really long hair last summer, and some people called me Thor or Chris Hemsworth or something like that. Sorry, go ahead.
The one criticism I've heard for like the Thor to Age of Ultron Thor is that he's a bit generic and a little boring, which I kind of agree with.
I think I have a reason for that, and it's because the MCU had other characters that didn't balance well with Thor. Thor was very, I mean, they in the Avengers films, they tried to call it out. Same as like I've said with Deadpool, all he does is he calls out the thing that seems to make it okay then. Just because he's acknowledging the joke doesn't mean it's a good joke. Doesn't redeem the joke. So when he goes, doth mother know you wear her drapes? Like that's funny, but that's the only way it really connects is that they make fun of it. And so he feels out of place like that. Does that make it kind of fit with what you're saying?
Yeah. So then I kind of think, and the Ragnarok, Love and Thunder, the main complaint there is that he's too goofy and too over the top. So I think Infinity War was a good like in between balance of that, where he still has that serious side. He's very emotionally driven, but they found a way to still naturally write some humor for him that doesn't feel forced like most of Love and Thunder. So
sure. Oh, Thor and Love and Thunder humor is really bad. I'm going to link a video in the description about just how people talk. Somebody did an analysis and how he's like talking to Star-Lord and they just seem to be talking, not even like theater kids. They're just talking abstractly and not to each other about anything. He's just, reminiscing and talking to the clouds and something like that. The video does a lot better job at explaining it, but I don't think we're going to Love and Thunder yet. Something that Ragnarok does different than Infinity War and Endgame, they use comedy to mask heavy topics, but they're different heavy topics. It's political in Ragnarok, as in you think about all of the things that the Grandmaster is doing, enslaving people and has his warriors or his guards go and do things at his will and making people compete in the games. And the comedy in Ragnarok and on Sakaar is about distracting people that they live in a garbage heap. Like, that's how it's used there. But in Infinity War and Endgame, the comedy is used for the emotional moments, but either Thor trying to cope with it or trying to lighten the mood somehow, which is coping, I guess. So it's used differently, and it's more impactful in Infinity War and Endgame. I wish there was a breakdown. You know how there's a breakdown of lightsaber, like how the lightsaber sound was made with a bunch of electronic sounds in the 70s and all that? I wish there was a breakdown of the Mjolnir sound design, because it sounds as simple as two metal rods sliding against each other. It's like that hollow whomp. But it's a bunch of different things that I wish I knew the different pieces of it, because it's so satisfying. There was, I think, when they were talking to the Frost Giant in the first Thor movie, or Laufey, they were talking to Laufey, and Thor was holding it, and it was a shot from underneath, and he dropped the hammer so he grabbed the leather strap at the end, and that whomp just made my spine tingle. It was really good. And they keep using it. The whomp, they keep using it, obviously, because it's Mjolnir, and it's just, they nailed it. Again, I don't know that they knew what a flying metal hammer made out of the core of a dying star actually sounded like, but they sounded cool.
Should we talk about his conversation with his mom in Endgame? I don't remember most of it right now, but
we could watch it quick.
I was just standing there. Some idiot with an axe.
No, you're no idiot. You're here, aren't you? Seeking counsel from the wisest person in Asgard.
Yeah, yes.
Idiot now. A failure? Absolutely.
It's a little bit harsh.
And you know what that makes you. Just like everyone else.
I'm not supposed to be like everyone else, am I?
Everyone fails at who they're supposed to be, Thor. The measure of a person, of a hero, is how well they succeed at being who they are.
Nice.
Cinema.
That's a good scene. That's a good scene.
Yeah.
Multiple scenes. First off, I just realized that he stole this Thor's hammer.
Yeah.
Does that create a branch timeline?
Well, Captain America had it when he went back.
Oh, that's true. Never mind. You're right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because he had to put it back in Jane. I don't want to think about that. That's probably some of the deepest that Thor or that Endgame got. Mm-hmm. I feel like everything else was just, let's get the mission, let's do it. Yeah, Iron Man dies, we miss him, and that hurts. But it's this one's the deep one. Like she talked about how you think you're a failure, everyone else is a failure. You just like everyone else. And he still kind of has that ego where he's like, I'm not supposed to be like everyone else. He's like, a hero is somebody who just exceeds at being themselves. Yeah. And yeah. I think
everyone fails at who they're trying to be. The true, what you said, the true mark of heroism is succeeding at who you are.
Yeah.
Something like that is what you said.
I like that. That's good. Yeah. And it really shows the wisdom of parents. Again, this goes back to Thor saying to Odin, there will never be a king wiser than you or a better father. Like, he just respects his parents so much. And that's amazing. Yeah. And even there, that's yes, it's the Thor from his Ragnarok and Love and Thunder as we know him, but it's also it's his humor in that scene is again trying to cope with him seeing his mom for the first time since she had died. So that was a sweet moment. Mm-hmm. Love and Thunder.
Love and Thunder.
Love and Thunder. Goats. Christian Bale being underutilized.
Yeah.
Bad CGI. I think that about covers it. I don't know what purpose it had. Mm-hmm. The only purpose was to show that he lost weight and was back to ripped Thor. Mm-hmm. Maybe again, we were promised Guardians of the Galaxy, and that was barely included at all. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I just remember laughing at it in the moment and then realizing that was pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, I agree with most people that I think Taika Waititi saw that Taylor Swift goat video for the first time right before filming, and he thought it was hilarious. So that's why the goats are screaming all the time.
Yep.
And well, what I really think about the movie, there's a lot of great concepts. You know, with Gorr kind of like challenging the status quo of the gods in a way, and just kind of, you know, going out around killing all these gods. And just, I mean, even all of his stuff was very deep and very well done, I would say, for what it was. It's just, it felt so out of place with everything else happening comically in the movie. And I think with the whole Mighty Thor storyline, which is Jane Foster's storyline as Thor, that could have been done very emotionally and could have had a lot of depth to it. But still, even with that, they chose to go with a lot of cheap jokes instead. I think Taika Waititi was the wrong director for what they wanted to do in this movie. Yeah. If we would have had, you know, if we would have had the same villains and almost everything, but you had like the Russos or Kenneth Branagh directing, it could have been a very deep and emotionally driven movie. But because it was Taika Waititi, all we got was cheap jokes. And even how he described the movie himself, he said it's like if you told a 10-year-old yes to everything. It's like, that's not how you make a good movie.
Remember we were talking about Christopher Nolan and people and studios handing him a blank check to do whatever they want? That's sometimes not the greatest idea. And I don't think Taika Waititi's coming back for any other movies in the future. I think it was too much of a flop.
And remember the ice cream store that was like infinity cones and it was a big infinity gauntlet?
Yeah.
That was in New Asgard. It's like that wouldn't be a thing.
Well, okay. It wouldn't. People had too much trauma from the blip.
Let me start a 9/11 themed ice cream store. I'll put that in the episode.
Chill!
I'm going to get canceled this episode.
I know, right?
Cut that one.
Oh
no. But it's the same thing is what I'm saying.
You're right.
You get what I mean.
You're right. It's similar to what happened in Hawkeye, where there could have been a lot more delved into people's reaction to superheroes now after the blip. Or I don't know if Hawkeye happens. Yeah, it does after the blip. But where he's thinking about all of the traumatic things and losing Nat, and they're just singing about how great it is to save New York, and he's traumatized. And that's even, I guess, Iron Man's in Iron Man 3 wasn't relating to people glorifying him, like his PTSD. But that's really what Clint suffered from for at least the first half of episode 1 of the Hawkeye show. And I think that's something that could have been explored in multiple different formats of like how these characters are feeling. Back to Thor, thinking about the original 6. Or sorry, not even the original 6, the Trinity, Iron Man, Cap, and Thor. Cap is settled with Peggy. Iron Man is dead until Doctor Doom comes back. Should Thor have had an ending after Endgame that caused Love and Thunder to not exist? I guess that's my question. Should they have found a way to finish him, to have him satisfied? Yes, they teased him at the end of Asgardian, as the Asgardians of the Galaxy. Could he have just shown up in the Guardians 3 movie instead of the Guardians showing up in his movie? I don't think Gunn would have wanted that, but
yeah, Gunn said from the beginning, he was like, I'm glad Waititi separated Thor from the Guardians right away, because I had no plans for Thor in my movie.
yeah. I wonder how that has worked. At least back when they actually connected Marvel movies instead of now when they don't. If they set things up in movies and the next director's like, well, now I got to write that into my movie. Thanks a lot. I don't know. Do you have any opinions on if Thor should have not been given a fourth movie?
Well, I think, as we've said in the podcast before, Endgame could have been just a solid end to the MCU overall.
And you're standing by it?
I'm just saying it could have been. I'm not saying it should have been. It could have been.
Yeah.
Some characters had open endings, but you can give characters open endings. And I think giving Thor this new purpose with the Guardians could have worked as an ending for his character.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. And I feel like the ending of Love and Thunder was very much like, the memes of like, if this movie ended in or was released in 2006 and it just ends in a pop song. I don't remember exactly which song ends Thor Love and Thunder, but like him and his daughter, who's not actually
Child
his
of
daughter.
Mine, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
Okay.
But regardless, the action of like them going out and like jumping and into action, and it was very cheesy. And I feel like that was like, I don't know how to end a movie, so yeah.
Also, like, kind of his whole arc in Love and Thunder is like, what's my purpose? What's my identity? And at the end, it's like, I guess I'll adopt a child. That'll be helpful. That'll be healthy for me and the kids.
This can't go wrong. The last thing I have, and I'm sure you know about this from Deadpool and Wolverine spoilers. Mm-hmm. Why was Thor crying?
Oh. I haven't seen the movie, so.
But do you know the scene?
Yeah. It was just Thor: The Dark World, except Deadpool instead.
Yes. I actually think it was deeper than that. Either it could be a not deep thing, and it was an alternate reality. That's the simple way. But again, he keeps bringing it up. So I think it's deeper, and they want us to remember it for a future movie where, almost like Thor, Deadpool, who is, he's kind of had this in his other movies where he's feels invincible, he's cracking jokes, and then there's something serious that happens, and he actually needs to lay down his life. Again, I don't think that's really a Deadpool character, but maybe in a future movie, this comes back and Deadpool has to do something, giving up something, and gets hurt, and Thor's cradling him and crying because they made this emotional connection for some reason. I don't know. I feel like it's something that could be explored in a future Avengers movie, is all I'm saying. Not knowing what exactly that's going to be, I think it's possible we come back to it later, and it's not just an alternate universe. That's my theory.
I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Fair enough. That's fine. It can do that too. Sure. But that's all I had. Do you have anything else?
Nope. Don't cancel me.
You've
that's all I got.
You haven't been giving them a lot of good reason not to.
Hey.
I still like Thor at specific points in his character arc. I like Infinity War and Endgame Thor. I like Age of Ultron Thor. I like the first Thor. But the others can be forgotten to time. Actually, no, now that I'm thinking about it, Avengers 1 Thor, where he is entering for the first time and taking Loki away. Like, that's a cool scene. Yeah, he's a hit or miss character, and I don't know how to feel about it, but it's good. I like him, and there's a lot to learn, especially in the first movie, I think, but I think that's mostly the depth of his character is explored in the first But it's good. It's a good movie.
He's got a cool combo. I mean, this is just random stuff, but he's got a cool combo at the end of the first Avengers movie with Hulk, where, you know, they're on one of those big flying monster things. And, you know, Hulk stabs one of its fins into it, and then Thor stabs it, so it's cool. But,
yeah, there's some cool stuff that you can do with Mjolnir and his moves, and even when you mix it with the vibranium shield and all that stuff. So I like it.
Hammer down, ha!
Do you think that? Which side do you take? Do you think that the elevator and the coat hanger are worthy? The same way that the floor would be worthy if he set it down or whatever.
I think they're inanimate objects.
I know. I don't know what what the big deal was, but yeah, that's basic. That's the gist of it. They're inanimate. It's fine.
I mean, I bet that was a fun conversation to write, and I mean, it's a funny conversation, but I mean, there's not really much, and there's not much of an actual argument there.
Cool. Well, that's all I had.
Nice.
Thanks for talking about Thor. Thank you, listener, for putting up with us for so long. And not canceling Zach.
Don't cancel me.
No canceling. Make sure to follow us on our Instagram and YouTube, and share this with your friends. Make sure you come back next week for another banging episode. Until next week, know that you're loved. God bless.
Thanks for watching, man.
Every time.